In case you didn't hear about it already, R2R cracked my plugin. I seem to have provoked them with my previous video. Now, most normal people would try and hide this and block comments and attempt some kind of damage control. But as you can see, not only did I not delete one single comment, I'm making an entire video about it now. And we're going to take a look at exactly how the crack works. We're going to clear up some lies that are being spread around concerning the cracked version. We're going to read the NFO file and discuss what I think about it all. So let's go in reverse order and start with my thoughts. So I actually think it's really cool, but maybe not for the reasons you think or expect. So we're going to unpack that a bit now. So in my previous video, I said multiple times that I didn't care about the ethics of piracy, but I didn't explain why. So I thought I'd take a minute to explain that in this one. So if someone wants to crack a plugin and they've got sufficient skills, it will be cracked, regardless of how much copy protection you try and code into it. It's like buying a bank vault grade door for your house. The burglar's just going to make a hole in the wall next to the door and go in that way. So you can try all you like to be Fort Knox, like Pace for example, but all you end up doing is bloating your software and inconveniencing your users, and then Tom Cruise turns up with laser beams and acrobatics and your shit gets cracked anyway. So in case you didn't know, most of my plugins are actually free and open source. I don't like copy protection, despite the fact I felt compelled to use it for two of my plugins. I'm passionate about creating cool stuff, and I'd rather just release that open source. But here's the problem. Central banks have printed so much money and governments have stolen so much money from the people that an ounce of gold used to cost $35, and now the same exact ounce of gold costs over $4,000. That means the dollar has lost more than 99% of its purchasing power, and that's about the same as your typical shitcoin during a crypto winter. So as much as I love to just give people gifts all day with free software that I've personally spent over a year of intense work developing, I also have to do stuff like eat food and pay my rent. And if I can't do those things, I will not be able to give you more free gifts and pay the server costs to distribute those free gifts to you. So that's why, in my estimation, the least bad and most fair solution to the paradox of the free software movement is to have a mix of free software and paid software, and for the paid stuff, use a minimal, lightweight copy protection that doesn't bog down your system and penalize people who actually bought the plugin. Now, a lot of people like to bring in the word rights into the mix here, and they say that they've got a right to software or something like this. Well, no, you do not have a right to demand free gifts from me. If you genuinely believe that I am violating your rights by not providing you with free gifts, call the police. Now, I do give you free gifts, but curvature was not one of them. If you own a computer fast enough to run modern plugins, then for you, $1 is probably not going to break the bank, and is probably going to be preferable to risking infecting your computer with malware just to try and save that $1 to get the cracked version on some sketchy website. But if the software was $1,000, now people are going to be much more motivated to risk the malware and get the cracked version, because almost no one's going to buy a plugin if it costs $1,000. So piracy exists in a kind of natural ecosystem. How much piracy do you want? Do you want a little bit of piracy and have a low price and make no money and probably go out of business, or a high price with lots of piracy and then you'll probably still go out of business because no one's going to buy your plugin because it's too expensive? Or do you want to target somewhere in between and just hope that enough people want to support you so that you can continue making software, and you just put up with the fact that your software is going to get cracked and some amount of people are going to choose to steal it instead of rewarding you for your effort so you can continue to develop software? But the thing is, if the crackers don't allow the developers to make enough money to pay their rent, then there's not going to be any plugins. There's going to be nothing to crack. So it's a kind of ecosystem. If the lions eat all of the other animals, well then the lions are all going to starve to death. So it's not really about the ethics, it's more about the health of the ecosystem. Because if the developers don't get paid, then there's no software. And if there's no software, there's nothing to crack. And if there's nothing to crack and no software, then there's no one using any of the software. And so everyone loses. It's lose, lose, lose for everyone involved. So the developers need to be able to survive, otherwise everyone just loses. So let me know your thoughts down below. Let's start a conversation on that. What do you think about my ecosystem analogy? Do you think that fits? Do you think that you have a right to free gifts? Let me know if you think you do in the comments, because I'm quite skeptical of that. But that's pretty much all I've got to say on that particular topic. We can continue the conversation down below. But let's move on now to why I think the crack is pretty cool. And let's start off with where to get it. Well, that's kind of a problem, because the trusted source kindly requests people not to upload it to mirrors, but in the meantime it's already been uploaded to other servers and forums, and so there's a good chance that it was repackaged and infected with malware in the process. But assuming you know where the trusted source is and you're able to wait over an hour for the shitty file sharing server to dribble the RAR file out at a snail's pace, I actually think it's one of the coolest cracks I've ever seen. And that's because it's an open source crack. And as someone who is part of the open source movement, I applaud this. So this means you don't need to trust the bundled executables, and you can learn about cryptography from the process of applying the crack. And I really like that. Now, I don't know anything about the executables. I don't use Windows, so I can't test them. And I would personally strongly advise against running any executable file that you downloaded from the internet from some random location that isn't 100% trusted, as even if you trust R2R, you might download from the wrong source and then you get infected with malware that R2R didn't put there. So if you want to crack my plugin, check the source code first to make sure it's trustworthy, and then compile the crack from source and run it. But obviously, just because you compile from source, it doesn't mean that what you're compiling isn't malware. It's possible that you could download it from the wrong place, and then you compile your own virus and then run it and shoot yourself in the foot because you were too stupid to read what you were compiling. So in my opinion, I think that publishing an open source crack is the best and most transparent way possible to do it. So I really do praise this approach, and I think that all cracks should include the source code, because then you can read the code, and not only can you check that it's clean, you can learn from it, and that's fantastic. That's something that I advocate for 100%. And if the code is clean and you compile it yourself, that's a 100% safe way to crack commercial software if you were going to do that anyway and you're not concerned with the legality of that. The only exception to that would be if the software itself has a tripwire built in some kind of way. But yeah, apart from that, gets the thumbs up from me. So R2R actually criticized me on a few points in their accompanying info file. And this is really interesting stuff, because they have been known for taking other people's plugins and stripping out all of the copy protection, and they run way faster. So the people who bought the plugins get a slower, more bloated experience than the people who are using the cracked versions, which I don't think is fair at all. I think that's really stupid that paying customers are penalized for buying the plugin, and all of the people who didn't buy it and stole it get a better experience. I don't think that's right at all. So knowing that R2R are capable of all of that really cool reverse engineering stuff, and they've got very good expertise in this field, it was very interesting to see what they said in their info file. And they did say a few things which sound a bit critical, so we're going to get into that now. So the first thing is that they said that I didn't sign my binaries for Windows. Now, I'm not a massive plugin developer. I'm just one dude who has done this all of myself. The website, programming, the plugins, the graphic design for everything that in the plugin, with the 3D knobs that I made from, I was doing that in Blender myself. Everything I've been doing myself. So for Mac, everything is signed. I have a subscription, 100 quid a year, that I pay to Apple, so that I am an authorized Apple developer, and so everything is signed and squeaky clean, and you can run that without any weird error messages or bypassing anything. Everything is legit on Mac. On Windows, just like most things it seems, the process is a lot more painful, complicated, and expensive. You have to spend something like 500 euros on some of these certificate issuing bodies every single year to allow you to sign binaries for Windows. And if you don't spend all that money on the expensive one and you just get the cheap one, well, the users still get warning messages saying this is a non-trusted developer and all that. It's just a really annoying process. And if you get the expensive one, you have to send all sorts of of documents and it takes months and there's all sorts of authentic. It's a nightmare. It's like everything on Windows. It's a nightmare. And so I just didn't bother doing that because no one cares anyway, because everyone just runs stuff anyway, just click OK or whatever. So no one really cares. But saying that, they do have a point that although if you just go on my website and download the file, then it's from me because it's from my website. But to be on the safe side, I now have published the hashes from all of my binaries for Windows and for Linux on my website. But that is a good point. It's best practice that even if you do download it directly from my website, which is the only place you should be downloading it from, is you can still check the hash and make sure that the binaries are as they should be. So that is a good tip. However, it is tempting to call pot kettle black because as far as I'm aware, R2R do not have any cryptographic proof that their releases haven't been tampered with, because even if you trust R2R 100% and you go to the trusted source or whatever, you don't know if at some point along that journey it may have gotten infected with malware by accident even or something like this. You can't really 100% trust it unless it has been cryptographically hashed or signed or something. You can't really tell unless you've got the hash. So it would be really good if there was some kind of cryptographic proof, public key, hash, something to make sure that the R2R releases, although you might trust R2R, whether they have been tampered with or not, because I know for a fact that people repackage crack releases and upload them to different mirrors, and then people get infected with malware because they didn't get it from the trusted source. But a lot of people don't know what the trusted source is, so that's the problem. So the point about OpenSSL is a really interesting one, because I do indeed use the Juice framework, and in that, they do indeed have a bunch of cryptographic stuff. However, they unfortunately do not have the precise tools that I would need to do robust cryptographic signing using keys, and that's exactly what I needed for my copy protection. Now, as I've said in the video already, I don't like copy protection, but the data says that if you don't have copy protection, no one's going to buy your stuff and you won't make any money. And that's a problem because the shareware model of donationware or whatever kind of like, please buy this thing that you want to do, it only really works if you have millions of users, and I don't have millions of users. I barely have thousands of users. So I just won't make any money if I don't put copy protection in there. So that's why I decided to do that. But of course, like we've already discussed, I do not think it's right to bog it down with excessive copyright protection so that the users who pay for it get a worse experience than the users who didn't. So the way that I made it was to be as lightweight as absolute possible. And the only way that I could figure out to make my own from scratch copy protection, not using any pre-existing solution, was to use cryptographic key signing. And that's what I did. And it's extremely secure. Using the actual cryptography, the actual encryption is extremely secure, like R2R mentioned. It's the industry standard, top-notch stuff. And I'm not going to write that myself. That's like I'm going to do an entire PhD to write that stuff myself. No, I'm just going to use the industry standard library, which is OpenSSL. And I statically link that so you don't have to then install the entirety of OpenSSL. And the way that compilation works on modern compilers is that extremely large OpenSSL distribution, which is 50, 60 megabytes, something like that. It only takes the bits that I actually use from the framework, which is a tiny amount of the OpenSSL library. And so the actual bundled code that is included from OpenSSL is I think kilobytes, if not a megabyte maybe. It's not very much at all. And it's way better in my books than if I was to get a pre-existing solution, for example, from Pace, where you need an iLock or some stuff like that. I don't really like that solution personally. Let me know down below if you prefer my plugins to be signed with Pace iLock instead of just the lightweight plain text number that you copy from my website, and it's like really fast and lightweight. Like the actual OpenSSL bit is extremely small. So another criticism from R2R was that I say on my website that my plugins are free of bloatware and they're lightweight. But then you look at my binary sizes and it's moderately large. Of course, it's not as large as some plugins out there. It could be a gigabyte or more, but they are pretty large. And maybe they were hinting that me bundling OpenSSL is bloating that out. Well, actually, it's not the OpenSSL, as I've already mentioned. What is making the binaries large? It's the images for the new interface. And everyone just loves the new interface compared at least to the old one. Maybe it's not the most pretty interface in the world, but people see it as a massive upgrade. And a lot of people like the 3D knobs and of the retro page and all of that. And that, unfortunately, comes at a bit of a cost, that the binary is a lot larger, and all of that size is pretty much images. Now, without all of the images, it is actually a comparable size to Compassion. It's just a few megabytes. However, do you want a plugin that looks like Compassion, which is, in my opinion, one of the most horrendously ugly things I've ever seen, especially for the fact that it costs over 200 euros if you were to buy it and not just get the cracked version? Or do you want a plugin that looks like the version 2 interface of Curvature? Now, I'm not saying that I've made the most beautiful interface that anyone's ever seen, but I think it's miles apart. Now, I have actually said in previous videos that Compassion is a good compressor plugin. It's good. I've said that before, but it costs over 200 euros. It's horrendously ugly in my personal opinion. And it doesn't do anything that made Curvature cool in the first place. It doesn't do the quantum tunneling algorithm. That's a new algorithm. It doesn't do black shoals, obviously, because nothing is doing those things. And that's why I made Curvature, to do things that other people weren't doing. And I've done that, and no one else is doing it. So if you want that stuff that has never been done before and doesn't sound like anything else on the market because there's nothing else on the market doing it, then you need to get Curvature, because I'm the only one currently doing a quantum tunneling algorithm or Black Scholes algorithm and a few other things in there, and I've got a bunch of things planned. No one's doing this stuff, and that's the point of Curvature. The point of Curvature wasn't just to make another compressor plugin, because there's plenty of those on the market already. The point was to do something unique. Now, the thing about WebSockets on the Windows binary, that isn't because there's any telemetry. I'm not sending any data. I don't even connect to the internet. Even the authorization step to authorize my plugin, I'm doing through plain text. So it's completely compatible with an offline authorization. If you copy that string and then maybe paste it to your phone and then do it on your phone and do it back, you can authorize my plugins offline. There's zero network traffic being generated by my plugins. The reason why that's getting sucked in is the Juice framework just sucks in a bunch of stuff, and that is unnecessary. I could probably optimize that out in my next version. So it's actually interesting to know. I didn't even notice that I was getting sucked in. So again, I'm a one-man show. I can't be completely omniscient about every single detail in computer programming. It's hard enough as it is to make a decent plugin, let alone the nitpicky stuff like this. So it is a bit of a nitpick on that one. I'm not doing any telemetry. And the thing is, R2R actually said that they checked my plugin, they checked it out, and they can confirm that it's not doing anything dodgy. So ironically, I have been independently verified by a trusted source, as you guys trust R2R. It seems most of you guys are trusting R2R. So if you trust R2R more than you trust most of the legit plugin developers, I have now been independently verified by your trusted source. So I'm genuinely not doing anything sketchy there. And if I was, I'm sure R2R would find that out in a heartbeat. So I want to wrap up the video explaining exactly how the crack works, because it's very clever and interesting. But before I do, I just want to squash a lie which is circulating around in my comment section and elsewhere on the internet, that my plugin was bloated and slow and using so much CPU and it was unstable and crashing, and R2R came along and they fixed it all and made it so efficient, and it's running way smoother and better, and it's way more stable and efficient and faster. Lies. It literally just, people are just lying at this point, just spreading misinformation, and it completely misunderstands the crack. So we're going to get into that in a second, exactly how to do the crack. But essentially what the crack does is it just bypasses my copy protection, and that's it. And it does it in a clever way, which we're going to look at. But it's impossible that the R2R version is any faster, because there's no such thing as an R2R version. All there is they've just bypassed my copy protection by using a different key to authorize it. It just authorizes with a different key. But the entire process, the way that it authorizes, the way that it runs, the stability of the plugin, the code of everything in the entire plugin is completely identical. All they've done is they've swapped out the public key, and we're going to get into that in a second, because it is pretty cheeky and pretty clever how they've done that. But any kind of misinformation being spread that they've made my plugin more stable or less CPU hungry or something like this, nonsense. It's a complete lie. You just don't understand what they've done, and that's the beauty of this crack. Why I'm like, wow, this is cool, is because it's open source, and I'm part of the open source movement. I'm an enthusiast about open source software, and that's why I find it cool. And you can just see the code that they have written, and the code doesn't lie, because you can just compile it and it does what it does. And so yeah, I just want to squash that. There's so many lies circulating around on the internet. People are just completely clueless. They don't know what we're talking about. And yeah, so we're getting into that in a second. But my plugin has always been very efficient, because I've aimed to make it as efficient as possible, as CPU light as possible. But just like Einstein said, like, we need to make things as simple as possible, but not any simpler. The same thing with my CPU usage. It's as CPU light as possible, but not any lighter, because Black-Scholes, for example, needs quite a lot of CPU cycles to actually do the math. So it's not the most CPU light, but for what it does, it's exceptionally lightweight. And the thing which is bloating out the plugin, as I say, is the images. And the images are only loaded into RAM for the retro page, which is the most like data intensive page. If you enable it, you can disable the retro page to make it even more light on the RAM, and then that's not loaded to RAM. So anyone saying that my plugin is slow and bloated, and especially the people saying it's unstable, what are you talking about? It's solid as a rock. It hasn't crashed I've not got a single crash report since I've released version 2, and the crash reports of version 1 stopped ages ago, because I've made it as solid as a rock. So the patch tool has two possible functions: test and patch. Let's have a look at the patch. So we define some stuff at the start and then read in a new key, and then we use this encrypt to key function here. So this is a helper function which obfuscates a new public key using the exact same technique that I used in my original code, and the only difference is that they're doing it in C and I did it in C++, but it looks essentially a similar type of thing that they're doing. I don't really know how they reverse engineered it that easily, but this is impressive. And then there's a sister helper function to do the opposite, to decrypt the hard-coded original public key that I have in my binary here. And this is exactly my public key that I split up into 3 bits, and they completely identified. So after we've created a new obfuscated key from a fresh new public key, we can then go and replace the old one with the new one and commit that, and that's the patch. And this is the keygen file, and the code looks pretty similar to what I'm doing on my side in C++ in working with the OpenSSL library. And the ultimate result here is it's generating the string which my server generates and gives you, that you copy to the clipboard and put into your plugin. Or instead of copying to the clipboard here, we're writing it as directly into the settings file, and then you can put this settings file in the place that it normally is generated, or override it, and the new key is going to be right there in the settings file. So now Curvature thinks that you've bought the plugin because this number matches up with the public key, which is hard coded into the binary. But little does it know that public key has been patched and swapped out with a new public key, and codes have been generated based off of that. And the reason why R2R first had to patch the binary and swap out the public key to a new public key is because you can't sign something using the public key. You need the private key, which they don't have access to. They only have access to the public key. So that's why you have to patch it, swapping out the public key. And it's an interesting and clever crack, because I'm not sure if it's actually the easiest way to crack it. I think an easier way to crack it would have been, instead of going after all of the encryption and having to deal with all of this complicated stuff here, I thought it may have been easier to just invert my conditionals, checking on the key after this has already been done. But they didn't do that. They swapped out the entire public key and did it that way. And I thought that was quite clever and quite a good hack. So fair play there. That's a pretty good reverse engineering work. I give that a pretty high rating. So there you go. That's the crack. Do I think you should use the crack? Obviously, no, I don't, because the data says that when people can get the software for free, they don't pay you, and I'm not going to make any money, and all my work is going to be... I've already made a bit of money from version 1, but I've not made that much money from version 2, and it seems I've not made that much money because now there's a crack. So if no one continues to buy Curvature, then I'm not going to continue to develop it as much as I would have done if people were actually supporting me and buying it. So please consider buying Curvature. If you use the cracked version to test it out more, despite the fact that I made a demo version, if you use the cracked version and you like it, please just consider buying it. And if you think the 49 euros that is currently on the website for is too expensive, just buy a course, buy something else, even just buy Delta Expose. It's a tenner. Like, if no one's going to buy it, I'm just not going to bother. So if you want cool plugins for me, doing stuff that literally no one has done before, you're getting new shit that no one has done before, then please support me so I can continue doing this. Otherwise, don't just be like some parasite, getting the cracked version, never supporting me, not even buying a course, not even buying my €2 course, and then just expect me to continue giving you free gifts. Nah, like, come on, like, help me out a bit here. If you've not bought it, if you've got the cracked version, and you want, if you like it, you're actually getting use out of it, please consider just buying something from my website. So with that said, that's the crack. Obviously, I don't support the crack, but I think that I definitely support open source software, and if there's going to be a crack, then it best be open source. So yeah, R2R, clever crack, big up for doing the open source, and that's the video. Bit of a long one, but hope you enjoyed this one.